These are the uncertain times on multiple levels in and around the professional environment. Hence, a people leader should agree firstly to saying yes, even if I don't know about it right now, I should leverage a coach at the first opportunity that I get it.
Welcome to our weekly webinars. And as you know, the second Wednesday of month is the Future of Coaching webinar hosted by Ramanathan. And while you're all pouring in, and before we begin our webinar for today, please do let us know where you are joining us from, how you're feeling. Please use the chat box and let us know. I see quite a lot of known names. Welcome back, everybody, for today's conversation. Miami, Florida. Welcome, Michael. Sarika from Bangalore. From a rainy Cheshire. Welcome. Good day, everybody. So as you see, we are joined by Mr. Sumanth Nayak, who is the CHRO of Societe General, and you would know a lot more about him in a minute. And yes, let me introduce Yamini, who is here, who's our moderator for the chat box. So if you have any question, please feel free to put it in our chat box and we will notice. Keep sharing your comments, your thoughts as you interact with our conversation today. Having said that, over to you, Ram.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much indeed. Sumant, welcome. There's Michael from Miami, Florida. I hope you're all well, Michael, you and your family. I don't know whether this particular spot is where you had the problem with Ian, or I hope all is well with you. So, as Komal said, in this particular webinar, we have been trying to get as many corporate leaders as possible in, rather than generally just talking about areas of general interest. And we have had people from Amazon earlier with Daimler and a couple of other companies. And today we have Sumant, who's the CHRO of Societe General. He's been with SocGen for almost about 14 plus years, nearly 15 years. And my own association, Coacharia's association with SocGen goes back about 5 years, where we started working with the previous CEO. And these are some of the things that Sumant might briefly cover during the conversation. And if I'm not mistaken, Sumant, I think Societe Generale Global, and you are headquartered in Paris. I think you won an ICF award last year or the year before or something, the Prism Award for coaching, because it's one of the few companies that I know, and I'm deliberately using the word few because there aren't really that many, who have a centralized coaching function, and it's headed by a MCC coach with whom I've had a few hours of really very meaningful conversations, and they're pretty advanced in terms of use of various assessment, climate survey techniques, and so on, which is one of the reasons why I started doing work with Societe Generale at a point in time several years ago. And much has happened since then. So Sumant, briefly, if you would like to say a little bit about your own career. I see from your LinkedIn profile that you just worked for one company, iGate, before you came to Societe Generale, and you had, it said that you speak Gujarati, and therefore I presume that you are a Gujarati. I'm not quite sure. The name could be Maharashtrian or Gujarati, or and also that you studied at Pune. So I did a bit of a quick research work, background work on that. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we could go into the specific kind of work that you have experienced in leadership development. Thank you.
Thanks, Ram. And although I'm not a very socially savvy person, I'm not on Insta, Facebook, the kind. So I'm quite surprised you still had so much information about me somewhere on the net. So Google has been up to it, I guess. Yes, I'm Sumanth Nayak. And just to precise, I'm the head of HR for Societe General in India, because as some of you might know, Societe General is a global bank, headquarters in Paris, and across, I think, more than 70, 80 countries with a large population of employees. So that's our group. And I am based out of India, currently based out of Bangalore, although we have two locations, Bangalore and Chennai. A bit about myself. Yes, actually, I'm from the south of India, a place called Mangalore. It's a bit away from Bangalore, where I'm currently located. But I was brought up in another city, Mumbai, which is a bit towards the west of India. And Gujarati happens to be a very popular local language there. I was brought up amongst a Gujarati set of community. I love Gujarati food. I love the language. I love the people. So yeah, there's a mix of everything. And being in that state, I also picked up Marathi, which happened to be another spoken language. Finished my graduation in Pune, another wonderful city that I'd love to be in whenever I get a chance. And after that, yes, my first job and the only other job I worked at is what was previously called iGate, now taken over by Capgemini as one of the IT services provider. Been in the US as part of that organization as an on-site coordinator, and hence I love Tom Brady. And when I saw somebody from Florida, I know the Buccaneers, I hope he follows them equally. So kind of started following Tom Brady when I was there in the early 2000s, so still remember him very fondly, and the game of football, of course. And last 14 years, yes, I have joined here in Societe General. So my career began as an IT professional. I was a software developer, grew the typical course of journey, growing up the people management ladder. But somewhere 8 years back, there was a career conversation, I would say, or I would call it, which encouraged me to step into this world of HR. And over the last 8 years, played a few different roles of business partnering, of talent management, and so on. And I was lucky enough at the start of this year to take up this role of being the head of HR of Societe General, based out of Bangalore. Yeah. So that's a bit about me.
Thanks, Sumant. So to go into some of your experience, even though you moved from an operational function into HR, and it's really what more and more companies ought to do, in my opinion. Cross-functional experience, people with operations coming into HR, and HR people going into operations, and so on. And in terms of the larger experience in terms of leadership development in the last 8 odd years in Societe General here, if you could talk a bit about the kind of initiatives that have worked well in Societe General, perhaps outside, that you are familiar with, and also some of them which haven't worked that well, so that we get a flavor of both, what your experiences and personal evaluations are.
Thanks, Ram. So yeah, from my own experience and what I've seen in and around me, I would say in my ecosystem, I would define the way leadership development going hand in hand with the coaching aspects of it at 3 different levels. One is engaging with somebody like you, Ram, or equivalent from the external world to help us come and coach our leaders to develop them in their needs. So that had a good success story, I would say, over the last 5 to 8 years that I have seen or I experienced myself. And I'll come back to the benefits of that. The second way we have tried is to leverage our own internal ecosystem. And Ram, briefly what you mentioned, we have a coaching practice based out of Paris, our headquarters, and they do have a strong framework which encourages not only one-on-one coachings, but also what we call the co-development. It's a group coaching, right? So that had a very interesting kind of success, and I would like to maybe step into that also in a short while. And the last but not the least is our managers. I mean, as a team, as the people leader in the front, we would also expect the managers themselves to be the coaches for their immediate team members. And this I'm talking of literally teams or managers who have like maybe 10, 15, 20 people, right? In terms of a scale of success, I would say surely the external coaching has been well received. It brought in the outside-in perspective. There was that non-familiarity, right? When you speak to an individual about your own development needs, if the person is unfamiliar to you, I think it breeds that ease, that openness much more than if you're talking to somebody who already has worked with you or whom you're familiar with. So I think that was one of the key success. And of course, to say that the leaders were able to benefit out of it was good. The co-development personally for me was an eye-opener. I did not believe before I experienced it that you could have a group coaching, right? And the way it was carried out, and then there was a framework which has been conceptualized within a SG, SocGen, along with I think Airbus or some other company which mastered it ahead of us. And that framework was so intuitive, so easy to adapt. Many of us then got certified into how to enable it, facilitate it for our own teams. So, but unless I went through it, I was a non-believer. I always thought coaching has to be one-on-one, but then of a group coaching for sure. The one area which I personally like to see grow is the manager taking up the coach as a coach hat. That's an area of work, I would say. And given the scale and everything that we have, I think it would take some time, but surely we are on that journey of wanting to make the manager to be also a coach for their immediate team members. So that's, I would say, in a nutshell, the coaching environment or the ecosystem that we have.
Sumant, yeah, you're absolutely right. The co-development, the way that you are carrying it out, I'm not quite sure. I'd like to understand a little bit more, and so I'm sure the audience too, whether that's really still done by an external agency, or is it also a part of the third effort that you said, the managers themselves who've been trained and they take charge of it? How does it exactly work, and what are your experiences?
Sure. So like I mentioned, we started with our group having a dedicated set of certified co-dev coaches who actually visited us. And this I'm talking of 3-4 years back when things were quite a bit different for the travel and everything. So they did come to us. They made us, some of our HR folks, including myself, experience it ourselves. And that is when I meant I really felt it is feasible. It has its own value, and the group coaching brings out a different perspective for yourself, not only for the others, but for yourself, and which is quite unique. Now, where we are at is we have started certifying some of our HR colleagues in that framework. So now they're certified to host or conduct the co-dev session for rest of our colleagues. So we have started scaling it up to say we get more people certified, and then they become our coaches, internal coaches. So they are able to do batches of 5, 10, 20 per year of small groups, 5 to 8 member groups. So that has been a good way forward, I would say.
So it's really a combination of the last two that you mentioned, both internal. One is the managers as leaders working with others, their
Yes.
maybe subordinates or peers as coaches. Another one is as co-developmental coaches themselves who are being certified in that. So
yes.
If you remember when we had a business roundtable about a couple of months ago with you and your CEO, Sunil, we spoke a bit about, let's say in a larger sense, that group coaching, which could work with team building as well and systemic approach and so on. So how specifically has this sort of evolved in Societe General? In what way have you experienced it? What additional benefits has it brought about for you, other than, let's say, working individually with managers and trying to work for their professional development as well as self-awareness and self-development, etc. So this co-development, what additionally has it brought in for you?
Sure. So firstly, maybe a bit on the way we go about doing it. So it's normally a very small cohort. We recommend not more than 8 participants other than the coach themselves. Sometimes it's just a group of 5, right? So it's a 5 to 8 people. We try to match them wherein they would not know each other from the past. So they would not have any direct working equation. So we try to make it as neutral an environment as possible. Surely no internal reportings, so not a manager of manager and so on. So we try to avoid those. And then the initial couple of weeks, so it's a once in a week, short 2 hours kind of intervention. And initially the coach lays out the ground rules and the way it would proceed, and maybe also illustrates a certain posture. But after that, it is a self-running group. The 8 people get an opportunity, one every week. So in 8 weeks, we cover all the 8 people, the whole length of it. In that week, in that 2 hours of that week, when we spend time, it is about that individual. So the individual will state his or her needs as whatever they have, what they're in for. And the remaining of us become the coaches. So in a way, while there is the primary coach, even the rest of the participants become a coach for this one individual for that day, in that week, for the 2 hours, right? Although it sounds very utopian before, but once I stepped into this, maybe after the second week, once there was that initial hesitation and the ice-breaking part of it, we were able to touch topics, sometimes even on the personal side, not only the professional related. The individual was really struggling with certain challenges of his or her own, and those came to the fore, and the individual was open, more enough vulnerable, and even trusting the rest of the group to saying, it's okay for me to share that I have this challenge personally, and I would like to work upon it. And the rest of them held the confidentiality and the privacy, and were more than willing to contribute to whatever, in whichever way they could, of their own insights to this individual. So for me, this learning, which is together, is the maximum benefit, I would say, which one-on-one, surely that one individual will benefit, and maybe the coach also. The coach also takes away some learning by coaching one person. But here, I can see these 5 to 8 people who come together for that duration of 8 to 10 weeks become more than colleagues for the rest of their tenure, because they have built that bond, they get that familiarity, the empathy. And even offline, I have known people started connecting themselves to saying, hey, Sumant, you have known me, you have heard me. Can I not approach you on this topic, the other topic? So there is that networking, the connection that starts building in these small teams, which I would say is the big USP of such kind of a coaching setup, which could not have been facilitated with a one-on-one coaching only.
Fantastic. So, I mean, to be very honest, this is the first time I'm hearing of this kind of an approach in terms of doing that, where, if I understood you correctly, it's about coaching the individual, but that coaching happens in a rota basis. If there are 8 people in 8 sessions, in which that leader becomes a client, one person becomes a client. And while there is a primary coach, the others also act as coaches. So in that sense, there are a couple of things that are happening, as you said. One is the appreciation, the vulnerability, and all that things happen. Then there's a team building also, which happens. They bond better. But before that, these people are already exposed to some kind of coaching competencies to understand nothing at all.
And that's the beauty of it. I knew that would be the curiosity. So it's on the fly. And that's what I said, maybe max 2 weeks, right? Two iterations, and then everybody follows the rhythm. So there is that meta, the primary coach, right? The coach is there only to observe and ensure. What I mean by this is, let's say you are the client and the rest 8 of us or 7 of us are the consultants, as we call it. There is a short framework. You get your time to state what your need is, what your thoughts are. We are not supposed to interrupt you, right? It's as simple as a decorum as that. And if I interrupt, the meta, the coach will guide me, Sumant, saying, let's hear Ram first. Let's not interrupt. So we let the client speak. That itself is a learning for the rest of us, saying, why is it important to listen? You don't always respond to the first statement that the individual makes. You have to listen and let the person spell it before you respond. We give a time bond. We give literally like 5 minutes for the client to speak. And sometimes the client doesn't speak, but we don't interrupt. We let the silence be observed. That again reflects on building a patience when you're interacting with your colleague, with your stakeholders, with your manager, to saying sometimes words don't come easy, but you have to let the others to take their time, gather themselves, and then speak about it.
Sorry about that. It was getting to be quite interesting. And if we are learning about a new method of co-developmental coaching, which, yes, I have heard about the theoretical part of it, but hearing from someone who's actually practicing it, it's really powerful. I hope we can get more sharing from Sumant as he joins us now, which he is. Yeah, you're muted.
You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Sorry for that. So can I continue from where?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah. So we do hold the who guide them to saying that just because they're in the forum, it is reaction of some type. That again builds a different kind of a mindset in the participants. So for me, this over the 1 to 3rd week onwards, people follow a rhythm. So that's why there is pre-learning that the participants have to go through. It just builds over a few iterations, and I hope I was able to communicate and not lost the narration in between.
Yeah, like some people have committed here, it sounds like coaching circles and communities that practice and so on. So usually what happens is when coaches are trying to enhance their own competencies, when they've had a little bit already background. For example, one of the most famous non-coaching circles that I know of is done by U Labs, which is from MIT, Otto Scharmer's Theory U, where the coaching circles are formed as part of the community and they work on it, but then they get a framework before. Coaching, whatever the other communities is really from ICF and others where they are already trained coaches who are practicing it. But what I find really very, very interesting and somewhat unique about it, pardon me, maybe there are some of them in the audience who are familiar with this in a corporate context, where you are actually learning by really doing. In most cases, what you do is you actually learn before, and then you put it into action learning, and then you enhance that, refine it, anchor it, and so on, which you're doing, which is phenomenal. And then you're getting advantage of this. And so a couple of questions arising from that. So from that point, do people think that they might want to go in for a more formal kind of training in coaching and so enhance that way? Or this itself for you is a good enough endpoint?
This by itself is a good enough endpoint. Yes, a couple of people, I would say literally 1 or 2 people have raised their hand to saying they would like to go through a formal coaching, but it's more the exception, and it wasn't part of our scheme of things. Our intention was to make that cohort functional, to make that cohort to come together and leverage their own. So, but yeah, anything else was a bonus.
It's a byproduct and it's a bonus. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So if, for example, in this particular case, the focus of the whole thing, the objective is really about the self-development of the individual. And there is, of course, the byproduct, as it were, of the individuals getting to learn coaching competencies, even if it is unstated, like you said, the listening competency, being silent, being patient, allowing that person to open up and be appreciative, speak as little as possible, multiple other things. If any of them go through now, for example, an ICF, ACC, they would automatically get that because they will score quite a few boxes out of that in terms of what the markers are.
Possibly.
But in a larger framework, though you said this is an endpoint and you are satisfied with this, would there be a value in this for you to systemically expand it into a larger organizational benefit, working towards not just the individual alone, but maybe as a second phase, once this has been done with that group, working towards certain larger goals for the team itself or for the organization? Would that be at all relevant to you?
Maybe if I answer it well, like I said, the third element which is still missing is to enable every manager who is in front of the team to be able to be that coach, not the mega coach, not the meta coach, but at least for the primary needs of the team. I would love if this kind of a mindset, this kind of a framework is adapted by as many managers in the front. That would be a very wonderful target state. But right now, I would say it's a journey because we are talking of a sizable number of this population and everybody picking the nuance, wanting to do it, doing it the way it's meant to be doing.
This has been a challenge that we have been facing for quite a while in terms of introducing the concept of group work in many companies. In fact, it has taken us almost about 5 years before we have been able, at least in India, at this point in time, to be able to convince organizations that they could move to group work and later to teamwork in addition to individuals as well. It's very interesting that as a company, they have initiated it themselves. In terms of the sustainability, Jennifer, I'm not quite sure exactly what you mean by the sustainability, but if it's about understanding more like what Sumant was alluding to in terms of more knowledge about the competencies and starting working from there in a more, let's say, professionally educated sense, but at the same time honing one's skills going, I think it's certainly very useful. And I would consider that to be extremely important as well in changing the culture of the organization. And then at the next level, can that be used in addition to the benefit of the individuals themselves for their self-development? Is it possible to use it for the organizational benefit? Like many of you who might be familiar with Project Aristotle, the Google study, is it possible then for the organization to set meta goals and measurable goals and move towards that objective? So yeah, that's really, yeah, keeping it going is fine. Fair point. But would it serve the organization better and the individuals better if certain elements were added to them, so they don't just remain what you might call as communities of practice or coaching circles, but can they actually lead to some specific end results? If, for example, if you take Theory U and the way the coaching circles are formed there, there is specific action points that is agreed upon by the group. And so like Suman, you said earlier, that individual client states what his or her felt need is. Here as a group, they work on it, debate it, and then say that they pick up a Theory U is much more of a collective societal kind of operation where they determine something. The same thing can be done in an organization, that let's say a group of 8 people can come together and say, hey, look, yeah, I've got this benefit. Next phase of this thing, can we look at what we can do together, the way that each of us impact each other and are impacted by other people? Can we define certain action points and so move towards those action points? Then, I'm sure we talked about the Project Aristotle in Google when we met at the roundtable as well. So if you're able to set meta goals and specifically achievable goals and things like that with the ROI factor, and you might actually see it as a measurable result in the bottom line of the organization, in addition to whatever you're already experiencing as this additional self-awareness, self-development, etc. of individuals.
Valid and wonderful thought, Ram. Surely can be explored. Have we explored it today? To my knowledge, no.
Yeah.
Not that it has come to my attention, but yeah, can be explored. I can see how it can be sent here.
Right. Actually, when you were trying to reconnect, what I was saying was that it's actually taken us about almost 5-6 years now to be able to convince organizations. If you remember, even when we spoke about it in the roundtable, it took a lot of effort in terms of explaining how we can move from the individual to the larger group in a systemic manner. But of course, keep the individual always as a center, but in addition, expand it to the team as well as the larger system. And which way you can achieve multiple things. I mean, you can achieve organizational objectives in addition to the individual objectives and the team objectives, and you can have the ROI factors and so on and so forth. But one of the things that seems to have helped is somehow during this COVID, I don't know in what way specifically, but the very fact there have been many challenges and people find that to cope with change, it's probably to better get a larger perspective of multiple people rather than one. I found this to be gaining more ground. More people are willing to listen to us about group and systemic work. So what's your own takeaway during this period? Has it helped you more because of the pandemic, because some of the reasons associated with the pandemic?
So for sure, during this course, the need, especially from a people manager, if I were to say, right, grew differently, wherein all of a sudden people reacted to work remotely. For sure, some of us faced challenges in their personal lives, which the rest of us experienced it from far. So yes, as a people leader, all of a sudden the ability to empathize, the ability to connect with their own teams at a different level outside of work became a need of the hour. Were we able to leverage this framework at that juncture? I wouldn't say yes, because at those days we did not want to work or of those kinds. Having said that, in the second year, which many of us re-established this forum, and it was the first time we did it virtual. We did it on the call, which I would say wasn't a bad experience. It did work, but finally people did want it to be more in a closed room setup, if I were to say so. So we did not leverage it mostly during the phase of the pandemic, but post bring it back into shape through a bit of a virtual connect.
Okay, thanks. So one of the questions that have been asked by Saurabh is, I think you mentioned it already, that there was an agreement in terms of privacy and confidentiality. Were there specific ethical compliances that were agreed upon before you started with this group work?
Nothing as formal, but yes, like I said, the meta coach, the primary coach would call it out and remind on a every session basis. At the start and the end of every session, we do remind people what we speak here stays here, and there is no, and I have not heard of any instances wherein it was breached. I think finally it boils down to the trust element. Even if we get something in writing in a formal way, having people to believe it's for them and they're equally vulnerable as the others. So I think that trust element played the part. And yes, the participation was voluntary. Even at that point in time, we called it out. If you want to participate, these are the basics that we would want you to adhere to. And some people, maybe for whatever reason, did not participate after knowing the particulars of it. So yeah, it worked on that trust between the participants, I would say.
Yeah. In most cases, that's how it is done anyway, Sumant. So, yeah. I mean, whether it's written down or not, I don't think that's as much an issue than people understanding this is what is to be. What I'm curious about is, did you? I know that in Societe you've done a lot of work in terms of surveys and post and pre and all that stuff. So here again, did you have an opportunity to measure actually in terms of both the self-development and the development of them as a group or a team before and after these kind of programs?
Yes, for sure. After, because there was no measure or yardstick for us to gauge, because the individuals would come in with their own unique needs, which we wouldn't know prior to it. Having said that, these people usually receive their 360-degree feedback, and we use a personality assessment tool for our internal purposes. So we have those as an input for all these participants. And the post, after they went through the 8-10 weeks of journey, we had an forum which they could come and share their experience, and we have seen a very good response, not only from themselves but also from their immediate team or let's say interacting partners or managers, who did see that change wherein the individual has picked up on certain elements which they spoke about during the session. And not to say we were able to divulge it, but it was more a feedback. Did you see a change in Sumant in the last 6 months? And if the manager or the colleague does point out something, we just observe it, not to validate whether that was the precise point which the person picked up, because then we did not want people to know what was the area of development that the person was going on. But yeah, it was more, I would say, qualitative assessment post the journey. Prior to it, we had given them few quantitative inputs based on their personality assessment. So it was for the individual to see how the journey is leading them, not more the ecosystem trying to judge or measure their change. It was more empowered to the individuals.
Yeah. I also know that you do have like a psychometric test for leadership groups, as well as you have your reviews. So these, from what you're saying, these actually were evidenced by improvements in those areas for the individuals as well. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And roughly what percentage of your senior leaders have been covered by this process so far?
I would say in terms of percentage, it would still be in the lower, between the 20 to 25% of the population, because given that it's a small cohort and it has to be done over a period of time, it's not that we can run multiple batches in a year or as many batches to cover. So yeah, the coverage is low or seemingly low, but my conviction or the personal satisfaction is it's an forum available for people who want to leverage, want to experience a new way of coaching, which otherwise is not made aware or not available. And hence people who have gone through it have benefited. For me, that is a good higher measure than the actual coverage, I would say, which I would think it would take a long time to span across the organization. Yeah.
No, I mean, even 20, 25, 30% is phenomenal, Sumant. I mean, from statistical kind of thing, which are extremely significant numbers, and they form a critical mass. Anything over 20% would really be an extremely powerful critical mass. So I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. So are there, like, this one has worked so well, your co-development initiative, which in a sense is working towards the self-development of the individual leaders, as well as it is helping individual managers to be practicing as coaches as well. Are there things that you have tried but which haven't worked so well in your experience?
So one thing which we would like to establish is wherein in our headquarters, they do have many of the business leaders who have themselves taken up a bit of the coaching metal, and they undergo the rigor of a typical coach, but then they're always guided by the MCC, the head coach that we have. We wanted to initiate those practices here locally, which has not materialized. So that's one from establishing a coaching practice, I would say. But from attempt at making some level of coaching, we had tried a very focused coaching intervention for, I would say, the first line managers. It was more organized, a partially training program in which there was a coaching element also, which did not finally, again, there we were not able to establish the cohesiveness or the togetherness that we were able to achieve in the co-dev kind of an environment, although it had all the ingredients right. It was targeted to a population. They were all brought together who had similar needs, if not the same needs, because they were all dealing with the same set of professional challenges. It was a smallish batch, 10-15 people, and we had external partners with us. So for some reason, we tried it a couple of batches. It did not receive the same traction in terms of the people leveraging it as a coaching. They got some training inputs, learning inputs as a manager, what you need to do, but not as a enabling them from their own development, professional development perspective. So we could not put a finger to it as to what missed or what step did we miss in that setup.
Okay. So here the objective was to train those people as coaches. Was that the objective?
No. It was to help them in their managerial role. So we wanted to give, so it was a combination of a typical managerial training program.
Right.
But we also wanted to bring in for them to get coached, not for them to become a coach, for them to get coached.
Okay.
So we thought it would be a good combination to have to be told the theory, and also when they practice it on the floor, they're also having a coach who accompanies them for a period of time, 3-5 months. But for some reason, it did not strike the chord. And these I'm talking of days when everything was in person, pre-pandemic. So there was nothing missing, so-called missing or evidently missing element. But still, it did not come out as a one which people look forward to. Okay.
So these were not like the co-development program where your own internal this thing, but external people came in.
Yeah.
And it was a training with a certain amount of coaching built into it, which I mean, if you're interested, we can always talk about it offline. But curiously, I had coached about 3 or 4 people in Societe in 30 days. 2 of them actually, later they joined the coach training program. They are both credentialed PCC coaches now.
Nice.
One of them is still with you in Paris, another one probably left. But I mean, there was a tremendous interest after when they got coached. They got very interested in the coaching process, and they wanted to become coaches themselves. So that's part of your own history. So there was something that moving away slightly from whatever we talked about. Briefly, I mentioned to you before we started, when Komal, you and I were talking about during the pandemic, at least three of these famous buzzwords now, which are pretty much like memes kind of a stuff. One is the work from home. Another one is the great resignation, and then the quiet quitting and all that stuff. So the work from home, which became pretty much de rigueur, mandatory in many of those cases. Like I mentioned to you, today I saw the news item from TCS, the largest employer in India, perhaps in the software industry, saying that now we would like people to come back home if they don't come back to work. And if they don't, they would probably be not working with us anymore. And this was a company which about 2 years, 3 years ago said very proudly that, look, we are actually seeing much better productivity in terms of people working from home than coming to work. So what's really happening, not just in SocGen, but generally, we very briefly talked about it. If you would like to expand a little bit on that aspect of it.
Yeah. So, yeah, interesting times, Ram, as all of us would acknowledge. The last 2 years, at least personally, I thought after we are out of the pandemic, we would be coming back to the usual ways of working. But now there are these new aspects which we need to go through. So my take, Ram, is as an industry overall, and no one organization I'm commenting for, everybody is learning, everybody is trying to adjust. In a way, if you look back, maybe it was much easier the day the pandemic hit us. It was just like a switch. You moved from 0 to 1. You were working from office, and then all of a sudden you have to move to working from home. And it was meant for everybody. It was like just that mega switch having to be put on or off, whichever way you look at it. Of course, technicalities and all aside, but there were no other regulation related thing. Many of the, it was done as an organization, it was done as an industry, it was done as a country, globe. But now coming back into the new ways of working, I think it is a divided house. Should you stay back in the way it has worked the last 2 years? Or can you find a balance between? I think that balancing act is something what every organization has to figure out for themselves.
Many of you may have some experiences yourself, either people who might be working in organizations or probably coaching there in some capacity or another. So if you would like to share something about what you have experienced on these, the work from home, do most people now would like to stay at home and work? Would they like to come back to work? Is there a midpoint somewhere? And is that what is also those stresses and strains leading to the so-called great resignation, which somehow or other seems to have, that phase seems to have ended from what it was like in gather, especially in North America, and quite quitting. If any of you have any specific observations, queries about that. Meantime, let's wait for Sumant to come back.
Sorry, Rama, I don't know where you lost me. I'm trying to say the organizations are trying to find the balancing act of what is the way of coming back to office. Is it all 5 days a week? Is it 2 days a week? Is it never? So while coming back, so this is one, to find the ability to integrate the people who have joined us new, right? And it's a sizable population. The second is when we are coming back, now there are the ecosystem that we need to adhere to. What I mean by that is many of us, or some of us rather, are part of what we call the SEZ zone, right? The special economic zones, which come with their own tax benefits for the IT services. So we have to now follow certain government guidelines, which I would think are the usual ones, which we always had, but we cannot be. There was a reason why we work from home. It was exceptional situation of a pandemic. But now when things are supposedly back to normal from a health ecosystem point of view, we have to follow certain guidelines. So I would think the next 6-9 months, all organizations are going to still dilly-dally to figure out a good balance. And until then, there will be these odd conversations which people might think, is that the right one, or would that have been done in a different way? But yeah, interesting times of change.
No, that's a fair point, Sumant. I mean, ultimately, there's not going to be a right or a wrong. And these are dynamic issues which might keep changing. But if you were to take away the SEZ part of it, which might compel you to have a certain amount of work presence, as it were, but even, let's say, a personal feel or your own team work or whatever it is, where do you actually see as a potential resolution to this? Is it going to be that people are going to be comfortable 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, whatever it may be, at work in a desk, or is it going to be somewhere halfway? What do you think is likely to be happening?
I think halfway would be my take, because that gives a good balance between both the personal needs, what we have been now used to over the last 2 years of working from home, and at the same time respecting the larger ecosystem that we are as professionals. Like I said, we have a new set of population coming in. In the future, we will have many new people coming in as we grow. So it can't be 1 and 0. It has to be somewhere in middle, is my view. And it's a win-win from all aspects, at least to the way I see it today, unless there is some unknown event holding us in the future.
Yeah, I think, I think it was Robert who had made a comment saying that it's just about the units of production, but it's also about the interaction of people, the societal needs, the tribal needs, and so on. That's going to be certainly there. Now, some of the other stuff like the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, and on. What's been your experience, or what's been actually your takeaways from other industries as well? Because I'm sure you are interacting with other HR managers from other companies as well.
Yeah, so these last, I would say, 15, 18 months, especially in the India talent industry, have been massive churn. And one way to look at it is all of us were in it together. So the burn or the pain was for all of us as an organization. At the same time, I am hoping it's an slight aberration. It's not here to stay. So the demand hasn't shot up, and supply, I'm sure, will catch up in the next few months, if not more. So that way, we should be running a steady state sooner than later. I am hoping already we are there. Now, everything that's happening is around the geopolitical situation. Would that have an effect on of any kind of a reverse trend, different trend in the talent market of India? I would say is to be seen. I think it's anybody's guess. Everything that's happening in Europe, in US, recession, and everything outside of that. But outside, if all those factors don't come into play, then I would think this Great Resignation that we saw in the early part of this year should hold back to a steady rate, even though it's a slightly higher than what we were used to before the pandemic. But it should come back to a more plateau or steady state phase in the next couple of quarters.
Okay. Yeah, Sumant, this is probably the last question as well as a comment. I mean, some of the things that you talked about, not so strangely, is what we actually see happening around in many other entities, institutions as well. One is that individual coaching itself, people are finding it fairly expensive from a budgetary point of view. And also, it's not always that there is a trickle-down kind of effort in terms of that awareness being communicated down. And so organizationally, there's a change. It's not very easy to measure the changes. So more and more companies are going into either the group work or like what you're doing, it's even one step better, where the co-developmental work with your own people doing that. And like you said, there was this experiment that was done, which wasn't probably working. We are actually working with a few companies where we are sort of reframing the training part into a group coaching kind of an effort, which includes self-awareness creation, which includes coaching, but at the same time, it also imparts certain specific skills of coaching. So these are some of the trends that we are seeing, and all of them are primarily because they are need driven in terms of what is the maximum value people can get out for the least buck, as it were. So how do you see the whole aspect of leadership development moving? And what role is coaching, or a combination of coaching with training, group coaching, etc.? What role is it likely to play? What do you think?
So my personal views, Ram, if at all, these are the times when coaching mindset would really help. Why I say a coaching mindset is, yes, we can always line up a good coaching environment, but people have to be willing to receive the coaching. When coaching, it's receiving feedback on what can be. It's not normal that people would shy away saying, I don't need a coach, I think I am doing fine and things. So why I stress on that is these are the uncertain times on multiple levels in and around the professional environment. Hence, a people leader should agree firstly to saying, yes, even if I don't know about it right now, I should leverage a coach at the first opportunity that I get it. That's one. So that's a change I would convey or request to all of my colleagues. The second is, yes, we need to help build that coaching ecosystem, which is where we need to empanel as many coaches, internal, external, whatever combination we can. And the third, yes, personally, I'm like I said earlier, I'm become a strong believer of co-development. So my bet would be having a co-development, or whatever we call it, coaching circles or communities of practice equivalent, should be the way forward, wherein we encourage people to say, yes, you should undergo coaching, build a coaching environment, and yes, try and leverage the co-development would be my thoughts towards that.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Sumant. I mean, I'll follow this up with you, personal conversation later. But these are exactly, I think, what I see happening in many other institutions, and with measurable results, and which you are already doing as well. So thank you very, very much for this truly educative learning session. And I certainly learned something new today from your co-developmental work that you're doing.
Thank you to you and your team, and sincere apologies for the networking issue. Normally it doesn't happen, just today happens to be the
That's okay.
Yes.
Okay, so
try to be better the next time. Yeah.
See you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Komal.
Thanks
all of you audience who joined us today. Sorry about the bit of trouble that we faced in terms of bandwidth issues. Thank you. Bye. Take care. Bye-bye.